Why do we protect biodiversity? I want to discuss two concepts here. The instrument value of species, that is the usefulness of a particular species for human purposes. And the intrinsic value of the species, that is something in and of itself apart from its usefulness to others. And we care about the intrinsic value more and more as time passes by. And this is again the picture of the periwinkle. This is an example our textbook use to demonstrate the value of a species. And that is instrument value, I would say. What are ecosystem services? And hopefully you watch my slides. I'm going to post again. Ecosystem services. We cannot live without ecosystem services. And here those beautiful pictures show you the values of those plants. There's anti-cancer drugs extracted from this flower and this yew tree. And some of the compounds we extracted from the Chinese anise for Tamiflu, for making Tamiflu. There's 4 types of services ecosystem provide for us. The first one is provisioning, such as food, shelter, habitat, regulating services such as pollination, purification of air and water, supporting services like soil formation, cultural services. One example would be like this: people come here to worship, and that is not measured by money, but that is of tremendous religious significance. And economists saying that the value chains used to place economic value on ecosystem services, and they also report replacement costs, which are estimate how much it costs to replace something with a substitute or artificial good. For example, if we burn out the tropical rainforest, how could we replace? Can we spend a large amount of money just to replace it? Well, first you have to spend a lot of money. And the second, you probably have to wait hundreds of years for that tropical rainforest to grow back again. So destroy the tropical rainforest, I think it's not a very smart thing that the humans are doing. And economists can also estimate value from surveys where people provide study or review preferences regarding what they would pay to maintain healthy ecosystems. Sometimes we do not have to pay if we live more sustainably or more smartly. I put a self-study slide here. Criticism of the ecosystem service approach. Some ecologists argue that some things existing in the ecosystems are not of value, or of very little value, or of the value we cannot see. This is not my attitude, but I want you to read this slide and reflect if you have this kind of attitude, and hopefully after you take this course, your value system will change. What are protected areas? The first category I want to mention is national parks. Texas has several. I do not believe I've been to any of them. I've been to some state parks, and very, very interesting, very beautiful, a lot of biodiversity. So I can only imagine how beautiful the national parks are. And the first one is Yellowstone Park. And they are managed by National Park Service. I like this graph because from the color you can see which managing agency is managing what, right? For example, USDA Forest Service, you can see most of the forests are in California, in the northwest area, in the west coast area. I'm pretty surprised to see this because I thought New York State has a lot of green coverage also, but this is very interesting. Look at the light blue color. It's managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. I believe this is Alaska. So is that smart to do the oil drilling just to destroy the wildlife refuge? I do not think so. We'll discuss about this later. And this is a really nice graph, and I want you to explore this. National monuments. Okay, so establishing a national park requires congressional approval, and the national monuments do not. And national recreation areas, those areas conserve and provide recreation around the big reservoirs created by large dams. And the National Wildlife Refuge, we have one close in Houston. It's in the Lake Jackson area. It's called, there's a Brand Beach over there. It's very beautiful. It's very interesting area, beautiful beach, great park in Brazoria. Those National Wildlife Refuge were managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. And national forests, as I mentioned, were managed by USDA Forest Services. BLM manage grazing and mining. Those are very important human activities. So you can imagine they manage large areas of grasslands and those important mining sites, and these establish the standards and the rules the companies have to comply with. Important laws. Wilderness Act of 1964 created areas where road construction and motorized transportation are prohibited, just to protect the wildlife, the wilderness. And this reminds me of a case study in the African country. They try to build this highway across this area when large populations of the animals migration, and over 20 countries write letter to protest it. Globally, the United Nations Environment Program encourages national governments to develop World Heritage Sites to protect those areas of significant historic biological values. And also, the U.S. federal government designates ocean shorelines and islands for protection. More than 1,600 marine protected areas and PAs are found in various aquatic life zones. And this is a list you can explore. And we have some beautiful national parks, wildlife refuge, and the national forest. Probably the closest one is the Sam Houston National Forest, and I remember students talk about that. It's really beautiful. I probably go there and check out for myself someday. All right, this concludes the second part of my lecture.